What if I told you that behind the screaming guitars and thunderous drums, some of heavy metal's biggest names were also the biggest jerks? They weren't just loud on stage, they were reckless, arrogant, and sometimes downright cruel off it. From brutal backstage fights to shocking betrayals, these rock icons left chaos everywhere they went. Fans saw legends, but those who knew them up close often saw egos spiraling out of control. Here are 12 of the worst jerks in heavy metal history. 12. Lars Ulrich, Metallica. Lars Ulrich is no doubt one of the most important names in heavy metal history. As Metallica's drummer, he helped shape the sound of thrash and built one of the biggest bands the genre has ever seen. But behind the success, Lars has also built a reputation as one of the most arrogant and difficult personalities in metal. He is remembered for being controlling in the studio, often clashing with bandmates over creative direction. His feud with Jason Newsted during the Street Anger sessions is just one of many examples of his dominating behavior. What really sealed his jerk reputation, though, was the infamous Napster battle in the early 2000s. Lars became the face of Metallica's war against music piracy, suing fans and taking a hard stance that made him look greedy and out of touch. Instead of sympathy, he faced backlash from millions of people who once idolized the band. Even today, many fans bring up his cocky attitude in interviews and his history of putting his ego before the music. His drumming may have carried Metallica into the history books, but his attitude locked him onto this list of heavy metal's worst jerks. 11. Ted Nugent. Ted Nugent is another figure whose personality has overshadowed his music. Known as the Motor City Madman, Nugent built a career on wild stage energy and sharp guitar playing, but he has also spent decades cultivating a reputation as one of rock's loudest and most obnoxious voices. Unlike many of his peers, Nugent thrives on stirring outrage. His interviews and public appearances often include offensive remarks aimed at women, minorities, or politicians, earning him criticism across the board. Beyond his music, he has also been heavily involved in political debates, pushing extreme opinions that many find distasteful. Fans who once admired his skills now often see him as a professional provocateur rather than a serious musician. Stories of his reckless behavior offstage only add to the image of a man who thrives on shock value more than artistry. Over the years, his constant need for attention, combined with his unwillingness to back down from controversy, has made him one of the most polarizing figures in heavy metal history. His guitar chops gave him fame, but his ego and mouth guaranteed his spot on any list of the genre's worst jerks. 10. Phil Anselmo, Pantera. Phil Anselmo, the frontman of Pantera, was once hailed as one of the most powerful and commanding voices in heavy metal. On stage, his presence was unmatched, driving Pantera to the top during the 90s, with albums that redefined the sound of groove metal. But offstage, Anselmo often revealed a darker side. His temper, reckless lifestyle, and offensive behavior created countless controversies. He was notorious for clashing with his own bandmates, sometimes threatening the very future of Pantera. Years of substance abuse fueled many of his violent outbursts, leading to unpredictable performances that frustrated fans. What made things worse were his rants, some filled with shocking and offensive remarks that stained his reputation. Even after Pantera's breakup, Anselmo carried this reputation of being volatile and unapologetic. While his talent as a frontman cannot be denied, his inability to control his temper and his history of offensive behavior have permanently tied his name to heavy metal's darker side. His voice gave Pantera an edge, but his actions secured him a place among the worst jerks in the genre. 9. Varg Vikernes, Burzum. Few names in heavy metal history are as notorious as Varg Vikernes. Known for his one-man project Burzum, Vikernes became infamous not just for his music, but for his shocking crimes and extremist views. In the early 90s, he was at the center of Norway's black metal scene. But instead of fame for his music alone, Varg made headlines for burning churches and committing violent acts that horrified the world. The most shocking event was the murder of fellow musician Euronymous, a crime that sent him to prison and turned him into one of the most infamous figures in music history. Beyond his criminal record, Vikernes has continued to embrace extremist ideologies and spread hateful rhetoric, which has kept his reputation tarnished long after his release. Fans of black metal may debate his influence musically, but few defend his actions outside of the art. His crimes, arrogance, and unrepentant attitude cement him not just as a controversial figure, but as one of the biggest jerks the heavy metal world has ever seen. In a genre filled with wild personalities, Varg Vikernes stands out for all the wrong reasons. 8. Dave Mustaine, Megadeth. Dave Mustaine's story is legendary in heavy metal, and not always for the right reasons. After being kicked out of Metallica in the early 80s for his drinking, temper, and reckless behavior, Mustaine set out to prove himself. He went on to form Megadeth, a band that would become one of the big four of thrash metal. His talent as a guitarist and songwriter is undeniable, but his personality has often made him one of the most difficult figures in the genre. Mustaine is known for holding grudges, with his feud against Metallica lasting for decades and fueling countless bitter interviews. Bandmates have often described him as hard to work with, thanks to his need for control and his unpredictable temper. His sharp tongue and arrogance have created rifts in the industry, and many see him as someone who can't let go of past rivalries. Even though he eventually reconciled with Metallica in later years, the bitterness that defined much of his career helped solidify his reputation. His genius gave us unforgettable riffs, but his relentless ego and inability to forgive have made him one of heavy metal's worst jerks. 7. Gene Simmons, Kiss. Gene Simmons is a name that screams ego in the world of rock and heavy metal. As the bassist and co-founder of Kiss, Simmons turned face paint and fire-breathing performances into a global phenomenon. Yet, while his business sense helped Kiss become one of the most recognizable bands in history, it also exposed a side of him that fans and critics alike call greedy and arrogant. Simmons has never shied away from boasting about his success, wealth, and conquests, often overshadowing his actual musical contributions. He has made countless controversial comments over the years, ranging from offensive remarks about women to dismissive comments about other artists. Many accuse him of caring more about money than music, pointing to the endless merchandise lines Kiss has slapped their logo on, from coffins to condoms. While Simmons sees himself as a master businessman, others see him as a prime example of self-importance gone too far. His constant need to provoke, paired with his shameless bragging, keeps his name high on the list of heavy metal's most disliked personalities. Gene Simmons may have built an empire, but his overblown ego makes him one of the genre's worst jerks. 6. Yngwie Malmsteen. Yngwie Malmsteen is often praised as one of the most technically gifted guitarists in heavy metal, but along with his blistering speed came a reputation for arrogance that followed him everywhere. From the moment he arrived on the scene in the early 80s, Malmsteen carried himself like he was above everyone else. Stories from fellow musicians and crew members paint him as a diva with an explosive temper. The most infamous example is the "You Have Unleashed the Fury" airplane meltdown, where he lashed out at passengers in a drunken rage. This single moment captured the larger-than-life ego that Malmsteen became known for. His obsession with perfection and his tendency to belittle others often overshadowed his undeniable skill. Over the years, his demanding personality caused rifts with bandmates, managers, and even fans who found his attitude unbearable. While his guitar playing left a mark on heavy metal history, his reputation for being condescending and difficult to deal with has never gone away. Instead of being remembered only for his talent, Malmsteen is often brought up as a warning of how unchecked ego can turn a genius into one of heavy metal's worst jerks. 5. Axl Rose, Guns N' Roses. Axl Rose is one of the most iconic frontmen in rock and heavy metal, but he's also one of the most infamous for bad behavior. During Guns N' Roses' peak in the late 80s and early 90s, Axl's voice and stage presence made him a legend. Yet, his constant lateness, volatile personality, and reckless decisions often turned concerts into disasters. Countless shows began hours late because Rose refused to perform until he was ready, testing fans' patience to the breaking point. In some cases, his temper boiled over into chaos, like the infamous 1991 Street Louis concert riot, which erupted after Rose abruptly left the stage. Beyond live shows, he often clashed with his own bandmates, causing rifts that eventually tore Guns N' Roses apart at their height. His ego and need for control left a trail of broken relationships and disappointed fans. While Axl's music earned him a place in rock history, His unpredictable behavior and disregard for the people who supported him secured his place as one of heavy metal's worst jerks. His talent made him unforgettable, but his arrogance made him notorious. 4. Glenn Danzig. Glenn Danzig carved out his place in heavy metal with his dark voice and commanding presence, first with the Misfits and later with his own band, Danzig. While his music gained a loyal following, his personality often pushed people away. Known for having one of the shortest tempers in the business, Danzig's arrogance has been the subject of endless stories. Fans and fellow musicians alike have described him as dismissive, confrontational, and difficult to deal with. His tough guy image has at times slipped into real-life hostility, leading to backstage fights and public meltdowns. The most famous example came when a backstage video of him being knocked out with a single punch went viral, tarnishing his intimidating persona. Instead of laughing it off or showing humility, Danzig doubled down on his anger, proving that his ego often outweighed his common sense. While his contributions to heavy metal's darker, gothic style are undeniable, his reputation for being self-absorbed and combative keeps him labeled as one of the genre's worst jerks. His music still resonates with fans, but his attitude made sure he'll always be remembered as much for his arrogance as for his art. 3. Marilyn Manson. Marilyn Manson became one of the most controversial figures in heavy metal with his shocking stage presence and theatrical performances. At his peak in the 90s, he was seen as the ultimate rebel, pushing boundaries with outrageous costumes, blasphemous lyrics, and jaw-dropping live shows. But behind the makeup and spectacle, Manson developed a reputation for behavior that went far beyond shock rock. He was notorious for mistreating fans, humiliating bandmates, and creating a toxic environment around him. Stories of destructive antics backstage and on tour painted him as someone who thrived on chaos at the expense of others. Over time, accusations of abusive behavior and disturbing personal conduct began to dominate the conversation about him. What started as a carefully crafted controversy to build his career turned into a reflection of a deeply troubling personality. For many fans, the line between performance and real-life cruelty blurred, leaving his reputation permanently damaged. While his influence on metal's theatrical side is undeniable, Marilyn Manson's ego, cruelty, and disturbing actions have made him one of the most despised figures in the genre, solidifying his place on any list of heavy metal's worst jerks. 2. Tommy Lee, Motley Crue. Tommy Lee is often remembered as the wild drummer of Motley Crue, a band built on chaos, excess, and controversy. While his drumming fueled some of the biggest anthems of the 80s, his offstage behavior painted him as one of heavy metal's most notorious jerks. Known for his non-stop partying, reckless stunts, and infamous feuds, Lee often brought drama wherever he went. His turbulent marriage to Pamela Anderson played out in the public eye, complete with scandals that overshadowed his music. On tour, Lee became a symbol of rock star arrogance, indulging in fights, public meltdowns, and outrageous antics that frequently landed him in trouble. Even with his charisma, many saw him as someone who cared more about fame and spectacle than his craft. Bandmates and fans alike grew frustrated with his unpredictable personality and need for attention. While his wild lifestyle helped build the bad boy image that Motley Crue thrived on, it also locked him into a reputation as one of heavy metal's biggest jerks. His drumming gave the band power, but his ego and scandals kept his name in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. 1. Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy Osbourne is called the Prince of Darkness for a reason, and it isn't just because of his music. As the frontman of Black Sabbath and later a solo star, Ozzy became one of the most famous figures in heavy metal history. But his career is also packed with outrageous stunts, drug-fueled chaos, and jaw-dropping moments that made even his fans shake their heads. From biting the head off a bat on stage to trashing hotel rooms and causing havoc on tour, Ozzy seemed to thrive on being unpredictable. His substance abuse only fueled the madness, often leaving those around him to clean up the mess. Bandmates grew frustrated with his unreliability, and stories of his reckless behavior became just as famous as his music. Even in his personal life, his temper and addictions created turmoil. While many fans see him as a lovable madman today, during his peak years, he was often seen as a nightmare to work with and a danger to himself and others. Ozzy's legacy as a metal icon is unquestionable, but his shocking antics and uncontrollable behavior make him the ultimate example of a heavy metal jerk. And there you have it, 12 of the worst jerks in heavy metal history. From ego-driven meltdowns to outrageous scandals, these stars prove that sometimes the chaos off stage can be louder than the music itself. But here's the real question. Do their bad attitudes ruin their legacy, or does the music still outweigh the madness? If you loved this wild ride through metal's darker side, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe for more shocking stories, and ring the bell so you never miss a countdown. Which heavy metal jerk do you think deserves the #1 spot? Drop your thoughts in the comments, let's hear your take.